at the end of the day, I want people to argue and talk about it, but I want you to hug the people you love and, maybe call the person you take for granted a little bit, because, it's what we have in this world is the people in our lives.
Jared, great to meet you, and very excited to talk about this movie with you. It is really quite the just gripping and like morality tale. I loved it.
Thank you.
Of course, where did the concept for this really come about?
It really came about, I think, with my experience of becoming a parent. I started writing. I sort of came up with this story soon after my son was born, and when he was born, suddenly I started feeling this great sense of uncertainty out there. This sense that, okay, I'm now responsible for this person, this living, breathing person. And the world is scary. Health insurance suddenly matters a lot more. All these little, everything feels a lot more dangerous. And I felt myself trying to figure out how I could restore order to that uncertainty. And I didn't know really how to interrogate it that well. So I thought maybe I could do it through a story or through a film. And then I also sort of had this idea that had been in my head that I never knew what to do with, is of a machine that could murder someone in the past. And I was like, oh, well, this is a really weird idea. I'll just write it in a file and forget about it. And as I was trying to figure out like how to tell the story of someone struggling with uncertainty, I thought, oh, maybe this machine could play into it. And that's sort of combining those two ideas is where it very much came from.
Well, it's a great way to combine those ideas because, there is such a great intersection of the themes that you're exploring in both stories. And with any time travel story, though, in a sense, there's always so much, explanation or complication of rules, whereas this feels nice and simple. How did you go about establishing rules that both made sense without overcomplicating anything?
Well, it was really important to me when I just thought about it, is I didn't want to come up get lost in the weeds, on it. I didn't want it to be too I didn't want people to spend their entire time arguing over the rules of it, So as I was sort of, I had sort of came up with the rough idea for what I the setup. And once I had this setup, it was all right, let me think about this. I spent a lot of time focused on researching how a machine like this could work, sort of getting myself a little bit base understanding of quantum physics and quantum mechanics and particle accelerators and everything. And so I sort of wrote down a description of what the machine would be. And then I set just sort of 3 rules for myself, which was 1, that the machine can kill and only kill. 2, changes are permanent. You can't unkill someone. And 3, once you use the machine, you remember the original timeline, not the new one you created. And then once I had those rules set up, I sort of wrote this. The rest of the story had to, fit to those rules. So I just was all right, well, if it doesn't fit to those rules and I've written myself into a corner, I have to figure out how to get out of the corner, staying true to those rules.
Well, it really kept me guessing throughout. I never knew what was going to happen next. So I love the way that you went about it. But as much as a movie like this can really live on its concept, it also really lives on its cast. And everybody in this film is just incredible, especially, I've interviewed Judy multiple times. I know she's a wonderful person, but she is, this might be my favorite thing she's ever done. What was it like going about that process and really finding the right people to bring your story to life?
Judy, and I wish she could be here. And I'm really bummed that the AMPTP won't give actors and writers a fair deal, so she can't. But Judy is such a talented actor and has been around and has been doing such incredible work for so many years, but she's always been the number, not even the number 2, the comedic sidekick, the person who's very much on the side. And I've always loved how much she's brought to her roles in that sense. And then you have these moments in The Descendants, when she comes in and she sees George Clooney's wife and there's this really awkward beat and she has to tell him that she knows everything. And in a lot of ways, that scene becomes the emotional turning point in the movie. And she does it in a way that is full of pathos and then turns out to be really funny also. And it's kind of, you're laughing, but you're also feeling. And I don't know, I don't think I count in one hand the actors who could pull something like that off. So I was so impressed with that. And I really felt like to capture a character like Sophie, who is wrestling with so many different emotions. In every scene, there's so many different things pulling on her from every direction. It's really a maelstrom of emotion. And that Judy was the perfect person to bring that character to life. And once I had her on board, it was, I was like, okay, if Judy is full of energy and just, very expressive, who's the person who's her Mal, who's her rock, who's the person who brings like a stillness and sense of strength? And I thought of Eddie Gathegi was the answer to that. Because Eddie, if you watch his performances from For All Mankind to The Harder They Fall to Startup, there's a stillness to his performances. There's so much deep emotion that's going on in his eyes and in little ways, but there's a stillness. And that sort of sense of stillness to him as an actor, I thought would work really well for Mal, especially playing against Judy. And luckily they both, responded to the script and I was able to work with them. And then filling out the trio was Payman Mahdi as Jabir, who Payman is one of my favorite actors. And I've always just been so impressed from his work. I think his performance in A Separation is like Oscar worthy. It is incredible what he brings in that movie. And, I really was a joy that like he could, was in LA and could do Jabir and bring him to life in a way that felt, because that's a character who has, he has his moral compass figured out, where the other two are wrestling with a lot of it. He knows what he wants. He knows what he's willing to give up for it. And he's willing to embrace these things. And he needs someone who could sell that without seeming villainous, without seeming, who could sell it in a way that felt like, it came from a place of true emotional pain and the audience could empathize with it. And Payman was perfect for that.
I'm glad that you found Payman for that in particular, because like you say, there were moments where in hearing the character's dialogue, I was like, that's a villain. But then seeing the performance, I was like, I don't want to hate him though. He's so good.
He's never supposed to be a villain. That's the thing. Like he's just has a different point of view.
And he found that balance very well. What would you then say was one of the biggest challenges in going about and putting this film together?
Well, we started trying to put it together in the winter of 2020. So the first biggest challenge was COVID because everything fell apart. Then we re-put it all back together and were able to shoot last year in July and discovered that we had to cut our days down. So we had 17 days to shoot 103 pages, which was insane. We were shooting all around LA. We were shooting in LA, which, I thought was like, great, this is going to be so cool. I can sleep in my own bed. But it's like, oh, wow, LA is very expensive to shoot in. Having done 2 Westerns in like New Mexico and Montana, it was sort of like a big learning curve in that sense. But at the same time, we just had this, an incredibly dedicated cast and crew, and everyone was just so inspired on set. And it was a really wonderful creative environment that we were able to get this movie made and make something we're all really proud of.
I'm glad that you had that opportunity. And yes, LA is quite crazy how much it takes to film out there. But at the same time, I love that it almost acted as a great setting for this story, for these astronaut inspired characters and whatnot. It
was really important to me to shoot in LA because of that. I wanted LA to be a character in the story. I think that's something I took from having made 2 Westerns, that your location and your place, you need a sense of place, or it's important for me as a storyteller.
Well, and LA is a great place for this story. I actually was going to say I felt it was its own character in a way. You took the words right out of my mouth. But the astronaut detail, though, that's something that I loved about Eddie and Faith's characters throughout the movie. And I'm curious where that story, that evolution came from in particular.
It was really important that to Mal was a scientist who had his dreams thwarted a little bit. And I and for me, I really, I wanted him to be a character who sort of had worked his whole life towards a dream and had it, as I said, and and then it got ripped away from him, and he had to, wrestle with that loss. And I think there was a part of him that was pretty depressed from it. And he found himself being like the father, like the main parent figure to this daughter, this stay-at-home, who's a stay-at-home dad mostly with it. And it was really important to me that like how I really wanted to connect them and show how his sort of thwarted dreams got passed on to her a little bit, where her love of science, because that's, they were so close. The things he loved became the things she loved. And then one of the coolest things was actually in Faith's bedroom. In the background of it, there's a poster on the wall of like an astronaut in outer space and everything. And that's actually my production designer. One of my co-production designers, Katie Simon, had drawn that for her dad, who had turned out, I think he had worked for NASA at one point, and she had drawn it as like I think retirement present for him, and like was able to put it on the wall. It was just really lovely to have that little added element that we brought in.
It's a wonderful little detail. I'm definitely looking forward to going back through the movie just to catch that, as well as just to see everything else again. Now, this movie's already doing great in the festival circuit. How are you feeling leading up to the release?
I'm really excited about the release. It's we have a great partner in Wellgo, and they love the movie, which is awesome, and they've really gotten behind it. And I'm so excited. I'm so excited to like get it out into the world, and I think the characters are. I'm bummed that the actors can't be there to, so everyone can see their great work.
Yes, it is unfortunate, and I do hope that the AMPTP.
I know, it's a mouthful.
Yeah, I hope they get their stuff together soon, because yes, you all deserve it. Before I let you go, I did want to, and I'll put this under a spoiler warning on the interview, but I'd love to talk about the ending.
Sure.
Because that's it feels like it can go in so many different directions, even before we actually see Judy walk through that door. And I'm curious, how many different iterations of the ending in particular did you go through when drafting, or when, putting this together?
Well, I have about 20 different takes of her walking through the door, but I always wanted it to end on a moment where there wasn't a clear answer on the other side, because I don't think it matters what the answer is on the other side. I think what matters is how she's feeling at that moment, where she's gone through this journey and she's willing to accept whatever is given to her. Because, at the end of the day, all we are is a collection of shared memories. And that's more important than anything else.
I did love seeing the smile then be the one that you kept. Because yes, after the turmoil she had throughout the movie, it was nice to see she's getting some kind of happy ending. And so, how do you, with movies like Inception and whatnot, ending on similar notes and being discussed for years, what are you looking forward to about audiences, diving into the ending and trying to figure things out?
I hope they'll argue about it. What I hope is they'll argue about what it could be. And then I kind of hope they'll come to realize that it doesn't really matter what the end of what's on the other side of that door. For me, the most important, so we had a test screening of this movie, not test screening, not a test screening, like friends coming to see the movie during an early cut. And one of my, after the note sessions, I got a text like an hour later from one of the people who was there. He's like, I came home and I walked in the door and I found my kid and I gave him a great big hug. And like, at the end of the day, I want people to argue and talk about it, but I want you to hug the people you love and, maybe call the person you take for granted a little bit, because, it's what we have in this world is the people in our lives.
Well, this is a very special reminder for people to do that. And I really cannot wait to spread the word about it. I'm not blowing smoke. I know I keep saying it throughout this interview, but I mean it genuinely. This is a great movie and I think people are going to love it. So Jared, thank you so much for taking the time to chat. I really do appreciate it.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. And I appreciate your enthusiasm for the movie.
Absolutely. I hope you have a good rest of your week.
Yeah, you too.